Here's my audience.
My name's Bob.
Good morning.
All right, we got the crew here from work to listen to me talk about my descriptive speech about how I moved out here from Wisconsin. I remember the day like it was yesterday. It was a smoking hot day in May. Andrew and I were sitting around the patio having a barbecuing some brats, some chicken wings, and enjoying some fine Wisconsin beers. This was the day that we decided to move to Bend, Oregon. Wait a minute, I mean Oregon. That's how we say it in Wisconsin. I don't know, it's kind of funny. We decided to set the day for this trip on September 20th of 2003. I packed my Jeep Wrangler up to the roof with all the stuff I thought I needed, and Andrew packed up his Saab with all the stuff that he thought he needed. This drive was 31 hours and 2,098 miles. We spread it over about 4 days, and we drove through 8 states. We drove through Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. We had a bunch of stops on the way too, but I'll get to that a little bit later. The only thing that really sucked about driving my Jeep over to Oregon was I had to fill up about every 180 miles. And man, I spent a lot of money on fuel. And since we were in 2 separate cars, we used walkie-talkies to talk to each other to see where we were at and when we needed to stop for food or some gas. The first stop was in Mauston, Wisconsin to see my grandparents. We had a good old-fashioned Wisconsin lunch. Bologna and cheese sandwiches with rhubarb cake for dessert. Man, I love rhubarb cake. My grandma makes the best stuff. And we headed out to see my aunt and uncle in St. Paul, Minnesota. My cousins also live there too, so we stayed there for the night and enjoyed some beers and some food with them. On our third stop, we stopped in South Dakota at Mount Rushmore. Man, I don't know if you guys have been there, but it's a pretty amazing place. It took them 14 years to sculpt all 4 heads of Washington, Roosevelt, Lincoln, and Jefferson. Over 2.3 million people visited Mount Rushmore in 2010. It's quite a lot of people. And when we spent the night there, it was probably the worst night of the whole trip. We stayed in a truck stop, and I can tell you what, I think I maybe slept 2 hours that whole time. I was just worried that someone was going to break into my Jeep and steal all my stuff or even steal me. So we got back on the road and headed towards Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. We stayed there, camped. We saw lots and lots of animals. We saw bears, moose, elk, and even some ducks, which was pretty cool. Camped overnight, and when we were camping, our biggest fear was the bears that we saw when we were driving in. We were told that if we leave food out, they will come and steal it, so we didn't leave any food. They kept it in their rig. We saw Old Faithful, too, and man, I tell you what, that's pretty cool seeing all that water rush out of a small hole in the ground. It's kind of like when a pipe breaks in your house and there's just water everywhere. So that was pretty cool too. And then we drove through Idaho and Washington and Montana. The biggest thing was we were seeing lots and lots of plants. There's people growing onions and garlic, and that's all we could smell the whole time when we were driving through these 2 states. And I had never seen so many trees in my life until I got into Washington. And there's a reason why they call Washington the Evergreen State. So we got to Oregon, and man, did it smell like pine trees here too. It almost felt like I was eating a Christmas tree the whole time I had food the first 2 weeks I was here. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on Milwaukee Street. That's pretty funny because I'm from Milwaukee, and Andrew lived in a house on Milwaukee Street in Madison. So it kind of fit us pretty well. And man, I would tell you, our furniture was pretty bad at this apartment. We had 2 camping chairs, a Rubbermaid container with a snowboard over the top that we put our small 13-inch TV on, and that's all we had. And guess what we had for beds? We had blow-up air mattresses. We did this for 6 months until we finally bought some real beds, and I must say that was pretty ghetto in my opinion. And you know, lived here for 12 years now, and I think it was probably the best decision I ever made in my life. It was really hard for me moving away from my family and friends and what I was used to in Wisconsin. But by moving here, it opened up a lot of doors in my life that I don't think would ever have happened when I lived in Wisconsin. And I want to thank you guys for sitting here and listening to me talk about my move from Wisconsin, and that's all I got.
All right. Go Vikings.